Hello, everybody. Welcome to Aloud. My name is Michael Chin, and I'm the programs producer for the Library Foundation of Los Angeles. Thank you. Our season is just wrapping up, and this is going to be our last program at the Taper for the spring. We have one more program, not here. It's going to be at the Nimoy Theater in Westwood, and it'll be Dave Eggers in conversation with Jim James of My Morning Jacket. It's at the Nimoy Theater, so check it out. That'll be next Thursday. It's been an amazing season with incredible guests and provocative, thoughtful conversations. We kicked off the season with Jamel Bowie and Ross Douthat discussing the first year of Trump's second term, then moved on to George Saunders, Heather Ann Thompson, and the progeny of Miles Davis and John Coltrane, just to name a few. Our centennial programs have explored the history of green books in Los Angeles and reflected on a century of our city's iconic architecture through conversations with some of LA's most influential architects. I am proud and tremendously grateful that Aloud's programming can balance pressing issues of the moment with award-winning luminaries and creative thinkers. It's a gift that we can bring these compelling and timely conversations to you, by and large, for free. Aloud's accessibility is intentional. It reflects our belief that ideas, stories, and public dialogue belong to everyone, and that cultural access should never come with a price tag. For generations, libraries have defended free expression and expanded access to knowledge, opportunity, and community well-being. Supporting the Los Angeles Public Library is more than an endorsement of a beloved institution. It's an investment in the democratic promise that every patron who walks through these doors deserves to learn, to connect, and to belong. Thanks to our supporters who make all this possible. Thank you. If you are not yet a member of the Library Foundation, I hope you will consider joining to uplift our city's most vital resource. In the 100th year anniversary of Los Angeles' Central Library, we are investing in the future by fundraising to expand vital library programs, seed innovation, revitalize spaces, and strengthen outreach. Now is the time to join and help us write the next chapter for our libraries. Learn more about how to get involved at lfla.org. In addition, I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Humanities Endowment Fund, the Ralph M. Parsons Foundation, Judith and Steve Krantz Foundation, Peck Endowment for Cultural Programs, Golden Globe Foundation, Arndt Fox Schiff, the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors through the Department of Arts and Culture, Deloitte, the Sharon Oxborough Endowed Fund for Aloud. And now for our program. I'm always thrilled when tonight's guest, Ruth Ozeki, comes out with a new book. She's the best-selling novelist, filmmaker, Zen Buddhist priest, and author of the celebrated books, The Book of Form and Emptiness and A Tale for the Time Being. Tonight, she'll be joined by broadcast journalist and host of the award-winning show Press Play, Madeleine Brand, to discuss her recently released first collection of short stories, The Typing Lady and Other Fictions. Spanning decades and settings, with the first story opening in a library, which we obviously love, to a 1970s New England town, to 1990s New York, to an island in the Pacific Northwest during the pandemic. These stories explore love, connection, and the ways we hold on and let go. They are also about the act of writing itself, whatever the method and whatever the form, on a typewriter, in letters, or with disappearing ink. The stories we tell, the ones we think we've left behind, and the ones who become part of who we are. Before I invite tonight's guest in, I'd like to leave you with one particularly beautiful passage from Typing Lady. Ozeki writes, "Stories are like that. They are collaborations between people who read and people who type. They are how we co-create each other and dream ourselves into being." That joint effort between writers and readers, speakers and listeners, artists and communities, it's what brings us together at Aloud. It's my pleasure to welcome Ruth Ozeki and Madeleine Brand.
Hello. They're so comfy. I know we're never gonna leave. We're just gonna stay here all night. Well, hi, thanks for coming, and thank you for coming. And my pleasure. I wanted to pick up on what we just heard because that comes from the first story, which is disguised as an author's note. It is called The Typing Lady, an Author's Note. And I'm just going to read what I wrote because it's a little complicated, so I had to write it down. It's a first-person account of a writer watching another writer she calls, and I'm assuming it's a she, calls the typing lady watching people in a library and typing furiously on her laptop. The author and the typing lady look like each other and a lot like you. The author then goes to the typing lady's book reading. Here we are. Everything is very, very meta. The book is called The Typing Lady, where she answers questions that she says are the usual types of questions, one of which I was going to ask you right here. So there you go. Which is why, after writing only novels, did all of these characters decide to go into short fiction?
Yes. Well, there's several reasons. Is my mic on? No, I didn't think so.
I think press up.
Now is it on? Okay, that'll wake us up. So there's several reasons that we have decided to write short stories. One of them is just simply that, I mean, I don't know whether you've noticed this in yourself, or maybe some of you have noticed this too, but it seems like my attention span isn't what it used to be.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And so that's one reason. And I've also noticed that amongst readers. And I certainly noticed that amongst young readers. I've been teaching undergraduate creative writing. And, and I've just noticed that there's a tendency to, to not want to take on big books. All of the books that I've written, the novels that I've written have been these, big, fat tomes. And there's something about writing, you spend all that time writing a big, long novel like that, and then it comes out into the world, and then, you want to give it to people to read, right? But I feel bad about that. I feel like, it's like this obligation. It's like, here's my novel, right? And it's really fat.
You feel like it's a burden?
I feel like it might, that you might feel obliged to read it, Whereas a short story collection is like a gift. It's like, here, they're short stories,
Right.
not a big deal, right? And so that was one reason. But the other thing too is just, to be honest, I've been, I occasionally did write short stories in the past. If somebody asked me to write something for an anthology or for a journal, something like that, I would do it. And I always enjoyed it. But it was really when I started teaching undergraduate fiction, and because of the constraints of the academic semester, we had to focus on short stories. Mm-hmm. I realized, I don't really know what I'm doing here, and I better learn. I better start, practicing what I preach. And so I started getting serious about writing stories then, and I found that I really loved the form. And that it's very different from writing a novel, and I felt somehow that it was going to teach me something. It was a skill set that I didn't have yet, but I was going to learn something by doing this. And in fact, I think I have.
And what did you learn?
I learned something about, it on so many different levels. I mean, about sentences, right? Mm-hmm. There's something, in writing a short story, there's no room for anything extra, There's no room for that stray extra adjective that always wants to creep in there. Tonally it has to be much more precise. It's more condensed. I don't know. I always think about novels as being these big. They're kind of like compost heaps, And you throw stuff on them, and they sort of pile up, and then they start to decompose, and you hope that they turn into something fertile, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of nice fertile soil. But that's not the case for a short story. It has to be this kind of polished, more like a polished gem, if you can do that. And that was fun. I'm the kind of writer who likes moving commas around, and you get to do that more with a short story.
So you mentioned a compost heap. So I was going to ask this at the end, but I'm going to skip to this last question because I think it fits. And it's a very interesting short story that you have. And it is about a character who eats plastic.
Yeah.
And I imagine this comes out of this idea you're thinking a lot about, perhaps recycling and composting, maybe. And in this short story, this character, and I don't know if it's a man or a woman or who this character is, unspecified, and this character likes to eat Bic pens and clamshells, plastic clamshell packaging. All sorts of plastic is delicious to this character. And then, the story is called Immortal. And at the very end, this person is waiting for a response from their therapist to a letter, which doesn't come, maybe a typewritten letter, I don't know, probably. And then they say, if there's one thing I've learned from plastic, it's how to be patient, because even when it's broken down, it persists. So you've given this pervasive thing in our lives, it's really taken over our lives, a spirit. And I'm wondering if you think that's a good spirit, a bad spirit, a spirit that is somewhere in between. How do you see it?
Well, I mean, plastic is really interesting. It's originally an organic, zooplankton. It's it's living things, right? And so and it changes over time, right? Right now, as you say, like the world is filled with plastic. I don't think it's something, I mean, right here, I don't think it's something that we can ignore. And it's become quite problematic. But in terms of a spirit, I'm fascinated with the materiality of, materiality in general, be it plastic, be it wood, be it metal. And I think this was something that I really got interested in when I was writing the Book of Form and Emptiness, because that's a book about a little boy who hears objects speaking to him, right? And so this idea of objects having, having stories, having histories, having, as you say, kind of spirits, right? I think that the other factor there is Japanese animism, Shinto animism, right? Is interesting to me, and I think that if we looked at plastic, for example, as having, having stories, having a spirit, having a kind of animistic force, maybe we would treat it differently. I mean, everything is so disposable now, right?
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, for example, in Japan, certainly in historically, and I think here, everywhere, right? We didn't have as many objects around, right? They weren't as disposable. I mean, typewriters is another perfect example, right? I mean, how many, right now we're using computers, right? But if you look at a manual typewriter, that's an object that sticks around, right? And, we go through computers, right? How many computers have you gone through, right? But typewriters go through us, right? So it's a kind of, that sort of shifting our relationship with the object that we're using, I think is interesting. Right, and so again, to go back to the plastic idea, that's kind of what I was after. Is what if we looked at plastic differently? What would it look like? What would it feel like?
But this person becomes plastic, right? This person, by ingesting plastic, and maybe we are all that, because don't we all have a little bit of plastic in us?
A lot of plastic in us, yeah.
In our brains and
everywhere. Yeah, microplastics. I mean, we're eating microplastics all the time.
So when you read it initially, this story, you're horrified that this person is chomping on plastic and loving it so. But yet, here we are. Loving it so.
I mean, when I was a kid, you remember Bic pens, right? We still use them, Bic crystal pens. Didn't you used to chew them? Right, there you go.
I still chew them. I love chewing them.
The smell, do you remember the smell of it?
I love it. Yeah, I still do that. I adore that. So how many typewriters do you have?
I have 7, I think now.
7.
It's 7, yeah.
And counting?
And well, I hope not, but yes, yeah. I think it was a few months after ChatGPT was launched, and I just got really tired. I just felt so tired of progress, you know. And I remember I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, you know, it's fine. You guys can just go on ahead, you know. It's fine, but I'm tired, and I'm gonna stop here, and I'm going back to the 20th century, right? And it was right around then that I bought the first typewriter.
It is exhausting.
It's exhausting
to
It's
keep
really-
up.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
a
I like
lot.
progress. I like mRNA vaccines, for example. Those are great, but you know, there's a lot about progress that's that's kind of exhausting. So anyway, that's when I started collecting typewriters, and then once I'd collected enough, I mean, they're not cheap, vintage typewriters, and so I started collecting them, and once I'd collected enough of them, I realized I needed to do something so that I could write them off as a business expense on my taxes. and so the book really kind of, the whole idea of the typing lady kind
Really?
of grew up. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's
absolutely.
a tax dodge.
Yeah.
Great.
Exactly.
Fabulous. All for it. You're beating them at their own game. Okay, so let's get you to read a little bit from one of your stories. And let me get to my paper here. I was going to take out my laptop, but I thought that would be a little.
You'd have to take out your
obscene.
typewriter, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So let me set this. This is the anthropologist kid, and the opening. And I'd love for you to read the opening scene, and then we can talk to it. It's narrated by a young boy named Joji. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. It's narrated by a young guy named Joji or Georgie. Right. Okay. I'm gonna have to juggle this. Hang on just a second. There we go. The anthropologist kid. There used to be this joke at Yale that in order to get tenure in the anthropology department, you had to have an Oriental wife. Nowadays, of course, it's not okay to use that word, but this was back in the olden days when we used language like that, and mostly it was the Oriental wives who told this joke and found it funny. Everyone knew there was truth in it. After the war, many of the tenured anthropologists had married Asian women, and if you included all the graduate students and untenured teaching staff, the assistants, associates, and adjuncts who, by accident or design, had mimicked the marital predilections of the senior faculty, their numbers achieved some statistical significance. The anthropologists were all white guys. They were tall white guys with stooped shoulders and sunburned necks they protected from the foreign rays with folded kerchiefs. Their skin, leathery from years in the field, had the cross-hatched texture of plucked chickens. Their thin, sand-colored hair was matted with sweat and stuck to their high, receding foreheads when they took off their pith helmets. Some of them worked for the CIA. I'm just kidding. They didn't really wear pith helmets, at least not at home. At home in New Haven, our dads wore tweed jackets with fraying cuffs, elbow patches, and missing buttons. Buttons that their wives, our moms, deftly repaired with quick Asian fingers, sucking on their teeth and muttering all the while in their various tongues. Our moms were indeed various. They were Japanese and Korean and Burmese. They were Filipina and Fujianese, Maldivian and Malay. Some of them had been students. Others worked as secretaries or linguistic informants for their husbands. A few had PhDs and taught. All of them knew how to type, catalog, and file. Here is something else they had in common. They were all considerably shorter than their husbands. Anthropology department parties were exotic affairs, tribal gatherings much envied by other faculties at Yale. When a political science or mathematics professor was invited to dinner, or graduate students from econ or English lit infiltrated one of our cocktail parties, they stood out like sore thumbs, made instantly conspicuous by their tall, blonde wives. In the days before cheap ethnic cuisine, before sushi and pad thai and shawarma and falafel became available on every street corner in New Haven, these departmental outsiders came to sample our anthropological fare. They came to eat our roasted meat on skewers, to dip their shrimp chips into our strange sauces. Because when an Oriental wife cooked even something as mundane as meatloaf, you could be sure it had a hidden kick to it, something peppery and piquant.
That's just fabulous. I just love the tone of it. It's so wry and also just gets at it. So the story is about this kid who is one of these anthropologist kids, and he has this friendship with a girl named Fatima.
That's right.
And he gets it into his head that Fatima's father is being surveilled by G-men, correct?
Well, that he's being recruited.
Recruited to be a spy, a CIA spy.
To work for the CIA, which was something that happened routinely.
Right.
Back
In the
that
anthropology
period, yeah.
department.
Well, especially because anthropologists, when you think about it, they're doing field work in different countries, and they're talking to natives, and they have a perfect vantage point from which to keep an eye on what's going on. So this was fairly common. I mean, this.
And you
I
know
didn't make this up. In other
You
words,
know
yeah.
this.
I know this.
Because
I know
you
this.
grew
Yeah.
up with this.
Yes, I grew up.
Your father was an academic,
Yes, he was an anthropologist.
an anthropologist. And did he have that neck?
He was an what?
Did he have that chicken neck?
He had, and he had a high receding forehead, but he did not wear a pith helmet.
He did not. And his last name's not Ozeki.
I'm sorry?
His last name is not Ozeki.
No. Ozeki is a fiction. It's a pen name. I
So
made it up. It has nothing to do with anybody. That's not true. Do you want to know where Ozeki comes from?
sure, yeah.
Okay. It actually is the name of an old boyfriend.
Does he know that you?
Yeah, he knows. He knows. I broke up with him, but I liked the name, and and so I asked if it was okay if I used his name, and he was fine with it, and his wife was fine with it too. So, yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know. Well, tell us about how you grew up. So you grew up in this mixed environment, academic environment,
Yes.
mixed ethnic environment.
Yes.
And did you feel like you were an outsider? How did you feel?
Okay, so
growing
this
up?
was in New Haven, right, which is unlike the West Coast, right? I mean, it's very unlike the West Coast. Every time I come to the West Coast, I feel like, oh, this is where I belong, But I did not, because people look like me here, right? But I did not feel that way in New Haven, Connecticut in, 1950, late 1950s. And so the story about the Oriental, that in order to get tenure in Yale anthropology, you have to have an Oriental wife. That is actually a true story. That's what our moms used to say, right?
Yeah.
And they thought it was really funny. They laughed at this. But what was kind of interesting about it was that, yes, there were not a lot of Asian people around. So I did not feel like I had a sort of ethnic community, or I had no sense of a kind of Asian identity, except for with the other children of these mixed race couples, right, who were half Asian and half anthropologist, right? and so we were this weird little tribe, of children who, and I've always felt that, that there's a certain kind of ethnographic introspection that's kind of built into my DNA, right? One side is always looking at the other. So that was kind of it. Other than that, I very much felt, like an outsider. I didn't know, people looked at me and they saw a little Japanese girl, right? And so I took on all of that projection and all of the kind of stereotypical, expectations that go along with that. So I, from a very early age, I felt that, as a Japanese girl, I had to be obedient, I had to be quiet, I had to be studious, and I could play an instrument, that was fine. Probably not a cello, more, a flute or a piano, that was good. I could not have a sense of humor. That was completely verboten.
Well, obviously you rebelled against that.
Well, I didn't understand that I was entitled to a sense of humor until I went to Japan, and everyone looked at me as a white American person. And then I realized, oh, this is great. You know, I can be loud and, you know, rude and, you know, I can be crass. And I felt like I felt completed at that point. You know, both sides kind of balanced
So
each
did
other.
you feel at home when you, because you lived in Kyoto for a while.
I lived in Kyoto for quite a while.
Did you feel at home there?
I don't feel at home anywhere. I feel at home, that's not true. I feel at home in Hawaii. Because that is one place where it's a melting pot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where my grandparents are from. That's where my mom grew up. It is a place where Hilo is a place where I just feel, oh, this is my context.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people of Japanese descent
Very
there.
a lot. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Do you like Spam?
I do not like Spam, so maybe I'm wrong. You know, maybe I can't. Maybe I can't. If I can't eat Spam sushi, you know, then.
But getting back to the story a little bit, it tells a quite gripping story of this kid, and something goes very wrong with his best friend Fatima.
Yeah.
And this kid sort of takes on the role of his father. It seems like he identifies more with his father. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, I think that's the struggle, you know, who to identify with, right? And I think that's kind of what he's struggling with, and he gets into trouble when he does identify with his father.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's looking back on it as an adult.
Yeah.
Has he learned anything?
I think so. Yeah. I would hope so. Yeah.
Because he's a sensitive kid.
He's a sensitive kid,
and he goes to her defense when she's being picked on by these other girls.
Yeah.
And then he does something, he basically forces himself on her.
He forcibly kisses her.
Yes, not just that, the kiss, but still it ruins their friendship.
Yeah.
And then he's racked with guilt.
Yeah.
But no one ever knows what he did. She even forgets.
She forgets too. Yeah. Right.
So tell me about what you wanted to sort of get at thematically there.
Well, I mean, one emotion that I am interested in is remorse, right? I feel that many of the stories that I write are actually, you know, they spring from a feeling of remorse, usually about something that I've done, something that I've said, something that I've believed. And so the story is kind of an attempt to understand that a little bit more, and to kind of, you know, mull over, like, how could I have done that? How could I have said that? How could I have believed that? Now, this story is, the setting is very much, sort of accurate, and very much as it was when I was growing up. The characters are not. But that feeling of remorse that Joji has, and that need to kind of think back and mull over, the details of the past. That was the feeling that I was interested in. And then also, doing that in order to try to come to some sort of understanding of yourself, right? And that's what I was really thinking about. I think too, I was thinking about the way that Maori's change. That our culture. I mean, I just turned 70, so things have changed a lot in the last 70 years. And that is puzzling to me, right? And that's something that I think
things are going back.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I think I'm drawn to kind of look back through time, and think about the way things were when I was growing up in New Haven, Connecticut, and think about the ways things, were when I was a student at college, right? And then, and to try to kind of piece together, what has changed, and and how do we kind of think about that, right? How do we sit with that?
Yeah. Well, speaking of college, one of the stories that has gotten a lot of attention and is quite searing is the story One Art.
Oh, One Art, yeah.
which is based on an Elizabeth Bishop poem, or it's titled after an Elizabeth Bishop poem.
It's very much, yeah, it brings the Elizabeth Bishop poem into, yeah.
So I thought I'd read the first stanza.
Oh, can I read the whole thing?
Oh, please.
Can I read the
yes.
whole thing? Okay, because it's so good.
It's so good.
It's so good, and it kind of builds so
Yes.
that one stanza isn't enough, right? Okay. Okay. So this is Elizabeth Bishop's beautiful, beautiful poem called One Art. I hope I can do this without crying. I might cry. Okay. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day, except the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster, places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch, and look, my last or next to last of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones and vaster. Some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I miss them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster.
Why did you put that poem at the beginning of your book, and why did you name one of your stories after it?
Well, the poem figures into the story called One Art, and so I wanted, okay, and so I am trying to figure out how to describe this without giving it away, without giving spoilers. The poem very much figures into the story One Art. It becomes a kind of it's an object in the poem. I mean, in the story, and so one of the things that I noticed when I was compiling the collection. And I can't even take credit for noticing it myself. It's very difficult for me to understand what it is that I'm, like the themes of, my writing. To kind of think about my writing in these kind of slightly abstract terms is very difficult. And usually I rely on readers to tell me what I'm writing about. And so I had a bunch of stories written, and I sent them to my friend Karen Joy Fowler, wonderful author of yes, right? Booth, and We're Completely Beside Ourselves. She's a wonderful writer. And I sent them to her, and I asked her, what am I writing about? And she, she told me. She said, you're writing about the way that we use creativity, we use language, right, to cope with loss. And so that's when I started to think more kind of clearly about this idea of loss. And that poem is about that. It's about writing as a way of understanding and of surviving loss. And that's, I think, in a way, that really is the through line for many of the stories. And it's certainly the what's important in the story, in the short story One Art.
It's a love story too.
It's a love story, yes.
And it's a love story that is between a student and a professor.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so you're talking about mores changing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And it's 2 women, so I don't know, does that change things for you?
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Well, in terms of the
how?
expectations and the mores and the...
Well, again, here too, one of the things that I'm noticing about, about the way, about sort of our notions of ethics, our notions of, morals, is that we're very sort of fundamentalist, right? It's black or white, right? It's this or that. It's good or bad. And I think we're becoming more and more entrenched in our, in our beliefs about this, right? And I don't see things that way. I really, think that it's more of a gray area. And I think that stories are really, really good at, at sort of entering those gray areas and investigating them. And I think that's what I was after with that story, right? Just kind of interrogating the kinds of judgments and the kinds of, assumptions that we make, that this is bad, right? That's too easy. That's too easy. So, maybe it is bad, maybe it is. Maybe it's a lot of things. Maybe it's an abuse of power. Maybe it's this or that. But is that all it is? I just kind of wanted to go into these areas and look at them, right? And kind of take the problem and turn it and turn it and turn it and look at it, spherically. And I think that's what literature does really well.
And the main character, really falls in love with the writing first. The way that the teacher talks about writing, the way she uses words, the way that she approaches literature and ideas, and then falls in love with her as a person.
Yes, right.
So she does fall in love with the language and the literature first.
Exactly. And I don't know. When I was in college, falling in love with Shakespeare, how could that not transfer onto my Shakespeare professor? Who was a brilliant professor. Now, nothing happened, but, I loved him, right? Because he loved the language, right? Mm-hmm. And this was, in the story, it's an Old English, they're studying Beowulf, right? Mm-hmm. And the woman reads Beowulf, and the student is just enraptured. Right, and I think that seems so natural to me, that you would get these things confused. Yeah. Right. That you would fall in love with, that you would fall in love with the language, you would fall in love with the literature, and you would fall in love with the person, who is, mm-hmm. Who's giving you this, right? Who's gifting this to you. So I think what I really wanted to do was explore, all of the many aspects of that kind of attraction, because I think it's formative. Mm-hmm. It was formative for me, right? This, my professors, and it wasn't just one. I had several professors in college who, who believed in the power of language and believed in me as a writer. And I'm a writer now because of them. Right, I owe it to them. Yeah. And yes, it was confusing and all of that, but it was real.
And important. Have you been on the other end of it as a professor?
No.
What?
Not that I know unfair. Of, anyway. Yeah. I think that's the other thing too. Is that right? In the in a university setting now. Back in the olden days, right, when you had office hours with a professor, you would always close the door of the office, mm-hmm. because, to give the student privacy and to enable a kind of, frank conversation to happen. And other students are sitting outside, so, you don't want this overheard. That was back in the olden days. Now you would never do that. Right, you would never. So I never close the door of my office. I'm a very huggy person. I would never hug a student. Back in the olden days too, we used to drink with our professors because the drinking age was like 18, right? And so we would have sherry, on Fridays, and discuss Shakespeare. That was beautiful,
Fantastic.
Now, I'm not saying that, it's appropriate now, but back then it was really something, Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was very grown up. We were very.
Do you feel like we've gone too far, too puritanical?
I just feel that that a lot of this is about fear of litigation. Yeah. And so everything needs to be everything. It's not. Yeah, everything needs to be kind of categorized and sort of formalized, mm-hmm. And codified, and yes. That's good and, responsible, right? But we do lose something there, too. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We lose a kind of, the ability to be differently with different people, right? Yeah. So, But this is the kind of thing that would get me into trouble when I was at school. So it's
Well,
something
now that you're out,
and now I
free,
don't teach anymore, so I can say these kinds of things. Yeah,
and you
yeah.
can drink
because
sherry
back then I
with
would
all
never have
sorts of
said that. Right?
youngsters.
I would have said no. This is exactly how it should be done. Yeah.
Also about memory, and I think there's a beautiful image of this. The main character is given the poem, the Elizabeth Bishop poem, by this teacher, and she finds it many, many decades later, and it's been eaten by silverfish, and there are literal holes in it, which is really beautiful too, because there's the loss made manifest.
Yeah.
But also, it's about the loss of memory and the loss of time, and it was just a great image, that just physical image of that poem being eaten away by these bugs.
Again, this idea of materiality, that here's this beautiful letterpress edition of this beautiful poem about loss that is now being eaten by silverfish, and just that, and thinking about how delicious that those words would have been, to the silverfish.
It's not plastic.
Not plastic, no. But just that
Next best
sort of,
thing.
yeah. I mean, the materiality there, I think, was really interesting to me too.
Yeah. So I want to talk about one final story, and then we can open it up for questions. So get your questions ready. The leaf blower. So here's another, it's adjacent. It's another main character, young woman who is a writer and who has just graduated, got her MFA and has no job. And she works, uses AI in her job. And
She's writing technical manuals for AI, yeah.
right, that will put her out of a job.
Yeah, exactly. The same AI that is eventually going to take her job. Yeah, and she's aware of this, yeah.
And she's living in this house taking care of a woman who has dementia.
That's right.
And she was once a doctor and very well regarded in the community, and now she's like a child. She has a relationship with a red robin who comes and seems
Cardinal.
A cardinal, okay, yes, red. And he becomes very angry at the husband. He's very jealous. But it struck me as actually a very hopeful story. I know that all the characters seem lost in different ways. Yeah. But they find this family and they come together and they create something new. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, again, stories come from so many different places. There's so many little seeds that go into making a story. That story was, I think, certainly came from an experience that I had when I was taking care of my parents at the ends of their lives. My mom had Alzheimer's. She wasn't just an Oriental wife. She was a linguist, okay? She had written her PhD, her thesis on, 6th century Japanese verb morphology. I mean, she was hardcore. And at the end of her life, she got Alzheimer's. And so I would kind of move into the house from time to time to take care of them. And so I think the story very much grew out of that, that experience. There was indeed a red cardinal that would come to the window of her bedroom and peck on the glass. And it's something called mirror aggression, which I just think is fabulous, right? And it's generally male.
Seeing itself?
The male cardinals are seeing themselves, their reflection, and they think it's another male cardinal, and so they attack it over and over and over again, right? And so we were having that exact same problem. And my dad had just received this red cardigan from my aunt, and he was wearing the red cardigan, and there was this red cardinal outside, like pecking on the window, and it was just that image of the two of them there,
Right.
that stuck in my mind. It was so beautiful. So that was, where that part of it kind of came from, and then the other part of it was just that, the other irritant in the story is the sound of leaf blowers. I'm sure none of you mind that.
We don't know anything about that.
You don't know anything about that, right? It's something that drives me nuts. And so here again, is that kind of, an instance where the irritant, my rage at hearing this sound, if it's leaf blowers or snow blowers or, the kind of, lawn equipment and two-stroke engines, outside the window, it really drives me nuts. And so, it was like, okay, well, that's interesting. I'm very angry. What can I do with this? What can I do with this, this rage that I'm feeling? And so it was like, it was kind of an exercise to see if I could, incorporate that into a story and, understand it a little bit more.
You're like the cardinal.
What?
You were like the cardinal.
I'm like the cardinal?
A little bit, very furious and pecking.
Yeah, pecking, exactly. Yeah. But it's mirror aggression.
Right.
I'm doing that to myself, right?
Yes, exactly. Well, I think it's interesting you turn it around because the leaf blower turns out to be the hero in the end.
That's true. That's
So.
true. Well, yeah.
Sort of. Okay, let's get some questions.
Okay.
Anyone have questions for Ruth?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, right there. That's good.
So I know you're a Zen practitioner, and so I'm curious as to how your practice and the themes of Zen play into your most recent book, if they do intentionally or as you kind of talk to other readers, what's come up, and also how your practice plays into your writing and how you write and how you go about being an author.
Yeah. That's such a lovely question. Thank you for asking it. I've been practicing Buddhism seriously since around the time that my parents started to decline. And it was my first, I'm an only child, so it was my first kind of encounter with sickness, old age, and death, right? And Buddhism traditionally, teaches us practices to accept the idea that we are going to, grow old, we are going to grow sick, we are going to die, and so it's a practice that helps us, understand the reality of this and be with it. Okay, and so in that sense, it's this kind of wonderful life practice, and I think that my kind of serious involvement with Zen coincided with the writing of A Tale for the Time Being. And so that book was the first of the novels and the first of the writing that was heavily influenced by the Zen practice and by Zen philosophy. In particular, the philosophy of the founder of the Soto Zen school, Dogen Zenji, and a fascicle that he had written called Uji, Time Being or Being Time. And so I was fascinated by this idea of time, right? And so was studying the fascicle, studying this, these teachings, and sort of sitting with it. And the book, I think that very much influenced. I would say that the book kind of grew out of that experience. And I think that's true for the Book of Form and Emptiness too. I mean, very much for the Book of Form and Emptiness too. A similar teaching by Dogen, but it kind of led to this idea, the ideas that are in that book. And so, the Zen practice and the Zen philosophy, I think, has really kind of permeated the books on a thematic level, but it's more than that too. It's the sitting practice, the practice of studying, the reading and studying and sitting with these teachings, right? I think has really influenced the way that I write. One thing is that I'm a very impatient person. Right? And writers, I think, are impatient. I mean, it's that whole thing. You don't want to write; you want to have written, and that I feel all the time, right? But the Zen practice kind of helps me relax in that. I mean, now I think about it as more of a kind of generative tension, right, between patience and impatience, or not knowing and knowing. Right? There's this kind of, when I'm writing, I don't know where the story is going to go, but I really want to get there, right? I want to know. And that's an uncomfortable kind of, tension, but it's a generative tension, right? And so the Zen, meditation practice just helps me sit in that uncomfortable place, right? And keep my senses open and, look around and, sort of understand the fictional world in different ways. So, yeah.
Great question.
Yeah.
Hi. One of the things that I really appreciate in your work is the way that I feel like you give young characters, you craft them in a way where it's not that they're, perfect. I feel like that you give them the space to make mistakes, and they feel very like embodied and real. And I'm just wondering, like, how do you capture that sort of like childlike mentality that just feels like, you read a sentence and you're like, oh, that was me at 12 or like whatever age. Is there something that you connect with in terms of like playfulness or like maintaining elasticity or like continuing to find joy? I don't know. I feel like so many people forget what it was like to be a child, and I feel like you capture that really well. So I was just curious about that.
Thank you. That means a lot to me because I love writing young people, I mean, I think the easy answer is that I was young once myself, But and I think the other thing is funny because I was talking to Karen Joy Fowler last night, and she said something about how we were talking. I don't have children, right? So I never had to grow up in that way, right? And when I was, my experiences certainly as a teen, right, were very raw and very, difficult. And so, I mean, and this goes back to the Zen meditation or the Zen question too. I mean, I do have a technique where when I'm writing a character, I will close my eyes, right? And kind of relax my body the way that I would if I'm meditating. And I will kind of put myself in the body mind of the character, right? And so, for example, in A Tale for the Time Being, the young girl now, right? A situation, for example, where she is in the apartment, and her mother is examining her body with a halogen light, looking for the bruises that have been left on her body by her classmates who are bullying her, right? And so it's a very, it's a very intense physical scene, right? And so when you're writing a scene like that, if I'm just writing it, right, and I've got this idea of the scene and I'm just kind of writing it, then the first things that come to mind are things like, her heart was beating rapidly and her palms were sweating and, all of the kind of cliches that are just not going to work, right? You need to get past that, right? So this is where, the idea of just kind of dropping into the body and sort of, projecting yourself, putting yourself in your imagination into the body mind of the character, right? And then opening up your senses, right? In Buddhism, we talk about them as sense gates, right? The sense gate of the eye, sense gate of the ear, mouth, and just kind of going through, doing a kind of body scan or a sense scan in the body mind of the character, right? And noticing things, right? And noticing, what the tatami smells like and the feeling of the tatami under her feet, and it's a kind of an old apartment, so it smells a little bit musty and it's a little bit soggy, and so you start to feel that and you start to hear what's happening outside the room and noticing the details in the room, right? And then turning it inward, right? And trying to understand, I mean, we all know what anxiety feels like, right? So, where do you feel that in your body, right? And it's like, okay, I feel it in my solar plexus, right? So then just staying with that feeling, and then I do this kind of little game where I think, well, if that feeling were a color, what color would it be? If that feeling were a sound, what sound would it be? If it were a landscape, what kind of landscape? And just kind of play in a kind of random way, play with these ideas. It's basically creating symbols, right? And then one of the things that was like, if it were an animal, what would it be? And then suddenly I thought, oh, it's a fish. It's a fish that's dying, right? In her, my rib cage, sort of thrashing and turning over and gasping for air, right? And that then was like oh, okay, that feels right. And so it's in her voice. So she starts describing her anxiety in those words, right? And then that created a kind of symbolic vocabulary for her that she could use to describe all sorts of emotions, right? So at some point she's describing another kind of fluttery emotion, and it's minnows. It's like a school of little minnows. Another time she's, describing a kind of powerful emotion, and it's a whale, right? So she's got this kind of vocabulary now that, that she can use to express these emotions without me having to impose, sweating palms and rapidly beating hearts, right? So you see what I mean? It's like it's coming from the inside of the character, not from me having an idea about her, right? It's, subtle, but something like that. It's fun. It's, but again, it's just about kind of relaxing and breathing and, sort of finding the fictional world, sort of from the inside, if that, yeah. And again, I remember my childhood, and it was, it was a very powerful time of my life, and I think I go back to it. I go back to my teen years a lot to find, episodes, to find regrets, to find, beliefs. Yeah, so there. I know you're probably a writer. Yeah, you're there. So that's why I gave you that. No, it's yeah, good. Write it down.
I'll just do this one.
Yeah, I love your title, because I'm a writer. My name's Charmaine. I wrote a book, a memoir. But it is very meditative. You go into the character. There's something in acting called being.
Yes.
So you become that, and, you put it in your work and things. So you learn from it, too.
Yeah.
And you kind of dissect situations, and in that learning, what did you learn during these multiple stories that you wrote?
Yeah, thank you. That's lovely. Yeah, I've never studied theater. I've never studied acting, but I suspect that the way that I approach writing is the way that, that actors might approach, building out a character, right? Yeah. And I keep thinking I would really love to study that more. I think that the reason that I write is to understand things, right? It's the way that I try to understand not just myself, but understand, the world, right? And it's a very different way of understanding than just thinking about something, right? I've certainly been in therapy, and writing is different than that, right? It just feels, it feels quieter. It feels, it's more like dreaming, isn't it? Right? Writing is more like dreaming. Yeah. Yeah. And exactly. And so in that same way that dreams can tell us so much about who we are, right? And what we are feeling, and what we're believing, and what we're worried about, and what we're angry about, and, what we fear, right? Writing is like that. It's like, it's really trying to, stay in touch somehow with the movements of the unconscious, and what did I learn? It's hard to say, but I think everything that I write, I learn a little bit more about about who I am, and what formed me, and what I believe, and about the way that I experience my life in the world. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I also, at my age too, it's like, what do I have to lose? It's like I'm 70. It's like I'm not going to hide anything. Yeah. It's too late to hide anything.
All right, we have time for one last question. I see one in the front row here. Oh, there's two in the front row, I guess.
I think we should do two then. Yeah.
Go.
I'll try to answer quickly.
Hi, Ruth. My question to you is, I know that college professor work, right? In terms of your meditative practice, in what ways do you integrate that into your classrooms, and are your students receptive to it? Because I know it was for me, because you were in my classroom at Williams 8 years ago with Bernie Ree for his Zen literature class. And I still think about that when you were there. So are your students receptive to it?
That's really great. Hi. Bernie's a dear friend of mine. Because I'm teaching creative writing, I teach these mindfulness meditation, mindfulness techniques to the students. The students who enter the class know that that is going to be part of the class. So it's not like I'm springing it on them, So they know that it's going to be a part of the class. Some of them are more receptive than others, obviously, right? And the way that I teach meditation in a classroom setting is going to be different than the way I would teach it in a Buddhist setting, right? It's much shorter, for example. It's more, anyway, there's lots of differences. But generally, I think, I think students are pretty receptive to it. I think, it depends too. A lot of the classes were in the afternoon. It's very hard to meditate in the afternoon. It just is. You just always want to fall asleep. So, so that was sometimes a problem. But a little. I think even just a taste of it is good. I wish I'd had a taste of it when I was younger. Yeah. Did you have a question too? Oh, are we going to do one more? I'm sorry. I just felt that, since they were sitting next to each other, that we should, right? It seemed like a little, yeah.
Hello. Hi. So when the pandemic hit, A Tale for the Time Being was the book that I turned to first. Because I had to find this one part where old Jiko is talking about the young people of today are hiwaboke.
Heiwaboke, yeah.
Heiwaboke.
Yeah.
Peace-addled, stupefied by peace.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, I hoped that the pandemic would kind of wake us all up in some way, and I think we're still so recovering. Yeah. But I'm curious what the pandemic was like for you as a writer and how that shifted things for you. You mentioned, when ChatGPT came out, you wanted to just pause in progress. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious what that time was like for you.
Well, that was a difficult time, wasn't it? We were so, we did not know how to handle that. And so it was one of those, I think, a moment of, kind of cognitive dissonance for me, where on one hand, I was okay. I had what I needed. I wasn't sick. I was able to take care of myself. My husband and I were living together. We could teach, out of our house together. So, it was, and we had time, right? We had more time. Everything slowed down a little bit. We had more time to write. We had more time to read. There was a sense of right. At the same time, we were incredibly anxious and reading about, hospitals and morgue trucks in the parking lots in New York hospitals, and and all of this other, really, and then the politicization of it all was terrible too. So I think more and more one of the things that I'm just interested in too is this sense of cognitive dissonance. This is happening and I'm feeling this, and how do I reconcile these things? Or can I reconcile these things? And how do I stay open to it? To these different realities, right? And not just shut down, right? And that to me is, I think, again, something that meditation and writing help you with, right? Just to kind of stay open to the world as it is, right? And everything that's happening in it. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. And thanks for coming out. And Ruth will be signing books. So,
thank you so much.
So great.
Thank you all so much for coming. We'll have a book signing out in the lobby where you just came in, and the typing ladies also for sale in the lobby, and we hope you'll pick one up and get it signed. Thanks, everybody.